So, welcome everyone. I'm Giacomo De Andres, a PhD candidate at Torino, and I'll be chairing this second meeting of this year's round of the Shelves. A few introductory words for those of you who are new to the format. The Shelves is a series of presentations of CUP volumes organized by the group Filosofia Antica Torino, which includes, in addition to myself, Giulia De Cesaris, Laura Marongiu, and Federico Petrucci, with the support of Cambridge University Press. Cambridge University Press is offering a 40% discount on any of the volumes presented in this series. To obtain the discount, you may email Marco Sharp and, just mention that you attended the event. His contact details should be available in the chat right now. Okay. So we're now ready to get started with today's volume. Galen, Writings on Plato's Timaeus, edited and translated by Eileen Das, Pauline Koetschet, and Mark Schiefsky. The volume is not yet published, but is forthcoming in the Cambridge Galen Translations series, perhaps in June, I heard. The plan for today is very simple. We will begin with a general introduction to the volume by the editors. This will be followed by discussion of some of the key issues addressed in the book by Riccardo Chiaradonna. Finally, we will open the floor for general discussion, if we have time. Before handing over to our speakers, let me introduce them briefly. All of them have published extensively on a wide range of topics and bring a wealth of varied expertise to today's discussion. Eileen Das is an associate professor in classical studies at the University of Michigan. She's the author of Galen and the Arabic Reception of Plato's Timaeus. Pauline Koetschet is a researcher at the Centre Européen, Sorbonne Université. Among the publications, I would like to mention the edition with French translation and introduction of Doubts About Galen by Abu Bakr al-Razi. Mark Schiefsky is C. Lois P. Grove Professor of the Classics at Harvard and Director of Harvard's Center for Hellenic Studies. Among his publications is a translation with introduction and commentary of the Hippocratic Treatise on Ancient Medicine. Finally, Riccardo Chiaradonna is full professor of ancient philosophy at the University of Roma III. His most recent monograph is entitled Ontology in Early Neoplatonism, Plotinus, Porphyry, Iamblichus. And before I step aside, let me thank you, Aileen, Pauline, Mark, and Riccardo for being here with us. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Giacomo. I don't know. I'll get us starting, and please, my Mark and Pauline, jump in. I guess for all of us, this project has been more than a decade in the making. So we have sat with these texts for a very long time, and I would still say that I'm still struggling to understand these texts. That they're very difficult. They're difficult textually, and I'm just going to speak to the compendium of Plato's Timaeus. So the volume is composed of two texts that perhaps have not received the attention they maybe merit, probably because of their textual difficulties in Galen studies and Platonic studies and beyond. So Pauline and I translated into English, and this is the first modern language translation of the Arabic version of Galen's Compendium of Plato's Timaeus. And this is a text that, compared to Galen's other treatments of the dialogue, besides the text that Mark contributed for the volume, covers the more or less the entire dialogue of the Timaeus. So we get this comprehensive look about how Galen is making sense of the dialogue. And maybe Pauline can talk a little bit to more the textual difficulties of this text and what it means, because we are engaging with it in a like medieval Arabic version. So we do not have any Greek witness to this text. It only survives in this Arabic translation that has about three textual manuscript witnesses to them, all more or less from Istanbul or like Turkish manuscripts. And it was edited by Paul Kraus and really Paul Kraus and translated into a Neo-Latin translation by Richard Walzer in the 1950s for the Plato Araba series through the Warburg. So this is really the first time that it's got kind of a textual retreatment, of it and making it accessible to people who might not be able to read Arabic or the very idiosyncratic Latin of Richard Walzer. So Pauline, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the text, and how we approach the text.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eileen. So, as Eileen was saying, this is a translation of a lost Greek treatise. There are two possible perspectives on this kind of text. Um, you can either approach it, and those two perspectives are not mutually exclusive. You can combine both perspectives. So the first perspective would be to use this Arabic witness as a witness of a missing Greek text and try to uncover the Greek uh, behind the Arabic or beneath the Arabic. You can, I mean, you can help. I mean, this is very valuable when, for example, you can use the Greek tradition to make sense of the Arabic. But this perspective should not, I think, um, make us lose sight of the other perspective, which would be to approach this text as it is, meaning a piece of Arabic philosophy and the reception and to reflect on on the reception of Galen and the role it played in the construction of the Arabic philosophy, and especially the role played by the Timaeus in the construction of the Arabic philosophy. The Timaeus is one of the most important Platonic treatises for Arabic philosophy, but not only philosophy in the very strict sense of the text, of the word, which would be a Neoplatonic Aristotelian philosophy, but also it was very important for theologians, for rational theology called Kalam, and for the history of sciences. So I think that what we try to do in our translation, but also in our notes and introduction, as far as the compendium is concerned, of course, Mark will be able to talk more of the commentary, of course. But as far as the compendium is concerned, we try to do justice also to this second perspective and to translate the Arabic itself, and not to try to translate the Greek going through the Arabic or something like this. And in the note, we also try to do justice to the role played by this text in the construction of Arabic philosophy. Its reception in its own milieu, in the Arabic-speaking milieu. Of course, we didn't forget the first perspective. I mean, obviously, this is a missing link. Obviously, this is an important text for Galenic studies.
Mark, I don't know if you
Maybe,
want to talk a little
Great.
bit about
Yeah,
your
sure.
text.
yeah.
Yes, let me talk about the commentary bit. So mine is the companion part of this volume. And what I did was to translate the evidence that we have for Galen's commentary on the Timaeus. So as Eileen said, the compendium gives us a sort of synopsis of what he made of the Timaeus as a whole. My text is mainly devoted to a stretch of dialogue from the latter part of the text that is about the theory of respiration and digestion, blood circulation or blood flow through the body. And there's a Greek manuscript first that has a Greek text. It's a lemmatic commentary on that stretch of the Timaeus. So we actually get lemmas from the Timaeus with Galen's very detailed exegesis. That's really the core of my text. But then there's a wealth of other evidence, which I tried also to incorporate as best as I could, drawing on the work that Eileen has done and others have done to collect all of this evidence over the years, evidence from Arabic writers, Maimonides, Razi, and others that give us fragments, we might say, or at least adapted little bits that reflect Galen's original wording from his commentary. We can't really treat them as fragments as such, in the sense that each of those authors was doing something different, again, as Eileen has illustrated, particularly in her work, with Galen's text. So it's a similar issue to the one that Pauline just mentioned. What we do, we can't reconstruct, say, the original Greek of Galen's commentary, I think, from these Arabic fragments. But we do have a good number of Arabic fragments. There are also some Greek scholia that have come to light, which enable us to get a new picture of the overall structure of the commentary. And what I decided to do in presenting all of this evidence was to actually create a sort of replica of the Timaeus itself with lemmas and assign the fragmentary material, the Arabic fragments, to those lemmas. So what you'll see in my part is excerpts from Timaeus, which I'm just putting there for convenience of presentation, followed by these Arabic fragments that I assigned to those stretches of the text. So that's what Schroeder did in his CMG edition of Timaeus commentary. And after I had worked on this for so long, I just decided it would be very difficult to understand all of this material without sort of trying to present it in this way. So for the parts that are not covered by that Greek manuscript, I give these sort of pseudo-lemmata with the Arabic material and the scholia also underneath. Then, of course, for that is in the manuscript, we have the lemmata and Galen's comments. So that's the way I chose to present the evidence to make it a little bit more intelligible. And of course, one can argue about these assignations of different texts to different stretches of the Timaeus. One can debate that, but in the end, a work like this is going to have to be just a starting point for further discussion and debate, rather than the final word on the reconstruction of Galen's commentary. So I hope at least it will be intelligible to the reader, presented in that manner. Now, the other thing that I also translated in my part is this set of, well, let's call them excerpts that were discovered in a manuscript at the Estoril Library by Carlos Lorraine in 1990, and then published by him shortly thereafter. And this is, at least Lorraine claimed, that these were fragments or excerpts of Galen's comedy from the Timaeus. I've translated all of this material and attempted to correlate it with the Timaeus. I present it separately because there's been a lot of debate about whether these things are genuine fragments, what their status really is, and what their relation is to the Timaeus commentary. And this is one area where the Arabic evidence actually made a great contribution, as Eileen pointed out, and others have pointed out too, that there are significant overlaps between some of this Arabic material and the Lorraine fragments, which support the idea that they are at least somehow derived from Galen's commentary. And so I would advocate for that position, that they are, in that sense, genuine, or at least related, derived somehow from Galen's original commentary. These texts be correlated with two different stretches of the Timaeus, and they give us some insight. It seems they're quite Galenic in content and in formulation. So I think that there's good reason to think that they're derived from the commentary. But I still present that separately because of the disputable character. So you get, in my part, we have first this sort of scaffolding of the Timaeus commentary with the Greek manuscript and the Arabic evidence. And we have separately these excerpts of the Lorraine material. So I hope that, by sort of comparing those two, it'll be possible to get a better sense of the complexity of this material, and it will enable further research into the provenance of these texts and how they were created. The Lorraine material actually cites Galen by name. So he said, Galen said, right, or as Galen said. So it's not, as it were, a quotation. This is complex. So that opens up the whole issue of research into pseudo-Galenic texts and summaries and so forth, which is a vast area that I know people are working on. And I think hopefully this material, having this translated, will help in that area of research as people continue to work on those texts. So that's really my nutshell summary of what I did. So now I think
yes.
Should
can I
Ricardo,
start?
should you
Yes.
would
yes.
you like to?
Yes. Thank you very much. Well, I am very happy to be part of this online event about this wonderful volume, I think, which collects at least three major achievements. First of all, the Galen's Companion is given its first modern language translation, and which is crucial, is here joined with its lost prologue recovered by Marwan Rashid from a medieval Latin adaptation of an Arabic magical treatise. So there are two achievements in this translation. The first modern translation with full notes, and the joint translation of the prologue, and as a third achievement, the commentary on Plato's Timaeus, which survives, as Mark has just said, only in fragments in Greek and Arabic. Well, all of these fragments are now fully collected and translated into English for the first time. The very existence of these two works, the Compendium Timaeus and the commentary on the medical parts, reveals the crucial importance of Plato's Timaeus for Galen, who both summarized and commented upon Plato's Timaeus. And the Timaeus underpins at least three pillars of Galen's medical thought: the anatomical embedding of the tripartite soul, so the tripartite souls and brain, heart, and liver as seats of the parts of the soul; then a teleological worldview anchored in demiurgic causation; and finally, the physiology of the vital functions, such as nutrition and respiration. Well, this volume, which is so huge and it really collects such rich work, can of course be read according to different perspectives: textual criticism, history of medicine, both Greek and Arabic, history of philosophy, both Greek and Arabic. My perspective is very, from a certain view, narrow. Is the perspective of an historian of Greek philosophy. So that my remarks are basically remarks related to my background. what really strikes me is, and both Pauline and Aline really are right in underlining this issue, is that the synthesis of Plato's Timaeus is somehow disconcerting if we have in mind Galen's general approach to the Timaeus. The most striking feature is that while Galen is always agnostic about cosmogony, especially in his late work, De Propris Placetes, here he has a precise view about cosmogony, what is usually called the literal interpretation of Plato's Timaeus. So he endorsed literalism about world creation in the Timaeus. I will come back to this issue in a few moments. I would first try to distinguish two issues about Galen's approach to the Timaeus, and I think that both are very important for our interpretation of the compendium. First of all, cosmogony. I think that cosmogony is not an important issue for Galen. He is agnostic on that in his late work, and I can, in my view, cosmogony is not even an issue in the compendium Timaei. I don't think we should put much emphasis on his on the passage in which he endorses the so-called literal interpretation. So cosmogony is not an issue because there is no empirical test about that. There is no way of settling this issue from a scientific, according to Galen's sense of science, point of view. But Galen is certainly not agnostic, and Galen is emphatically not agnostic about Crafton's like demiurgic causation. Demiurgic causation is crucial for Galen because it is crucial for his design theology and for his view that nature and the human body are organized by a divine maker. Which is absolutely not a marginal aspect of his views on nature and body. I think these two issues should be distinguished. Here I would come back to the cosmological issue. Aline and Pauline explain that Galen's literalism in this compendium Timaei can be explained by recalling the literary gender of the compendium. It is a synopsis, so a compendium, and it has lower demonstrative standards vis-à-vis Galen's fully developed works. And the parallel is with Galen's synopsis of the Pulse, which has lower standards vis-à-vis his great works on the Pulse. I think this is a very ingenious explanation. I'm not quite sure that it fully works. I would suggest a different explanation, or at least a complementary explanation. I think there is, first of all, a difference. The synopsis of the Pulse is a self-synopsis. Galen is summarizing his own views, his own works, while the Compendium Timaeus is a paraphrase of someone else, of Plato's dialogue. And I think that, after all, literalism is here not so much reflecting some standards of scientific rigor, but simply the paraphrastic fidelity to the Timaeus. What Galen says is that Timaeus says that the word is generated, and this is simply what it is in the text, in a sense. And the issue whether this account should be interpreted in a way or another is not an issue at this level of exegesis. Galen is simply stating that what Timaeus says in the Timaeus is that the word is generated. Full stop. Then, of course, the issue, the properly philosophical issue whether the word is really generated or not is a further issue, which is not really relevant in this context. By the way, there was, of course, a large debate in the Platonist tradition whether Plato's account should be interpreted in a literal or in a metaphorical way. The issue was not settled in Galen's time. Only after Plotinus, the so-called metaphorical interpretation of the Timaeus becomes the standard interpretation. When Galen was working, there were competing interpretations, and the most authoritative Platonist of this time, Atticus, opted for a literal interpretation. In the Placitis, Hippocrates, and Platonis, Galen notes that Plato himself presented his cosmological account as pithanon, as probable, rather than demonstrative. And that's the key for Galen to explain away the so-called speculative parts of the Timaeus. So I fully agree with your emphasis on these issues. I would perhaps, and that's a question for you, maybe venture for a slightly different interpretation. It's not so much the literary genre, it's simply the scope of the synopsis, which is nothing more than an opinionated, fully opinionated paraphrase of the Timaeus. And I think I very much like your remarks that Galen's point of view emerges not so much in what he says, but in the omissions, in what lacks in this synopsis. For example, the paradigmatic cause, which is not almost not present in the synopsis, but certainly is not very important or not important at all. And from this point of view, I think we can really assess Galen's proximity and distance vis-a-vis the Platonists of his time. Well, I'm in a sense, I don't find it is very interesting to raise the question whether Galen was a Platonist or not. Certain Plato is a major authority for Galen. By the way, it depends on what we stipulate as being a Platonist, in a sense. But he was fully aware of the Platonist debate of his time. He incorporated these debates into his work. So I fully agree that it was not impervious vis-a-vis the Platonist panorama of his time, but his approach was very different from all other Platonist philosopher of his time. So it depends on what we put into our notion of Platonism, whether Galen was a Platonist or not. Pauline has just published a very important collection of fragments from Galen's De Demonstratione with Matthias Havda. And I think that these fragments provide further evidence of this attitude vis-a-vis the Platonist debate. For example, in book 4 of the Demonstratione, we have several fragments of this book. Galen criticizes Aristotle's criticism of the Timaeus in the first book of the Decaelo. Well, it's a rather complicated issue. What seems to me interesting are two issues. First of all, this criticism of Aristotle is not so much a defense of Plato's cosmogony. It's not what matters for Galen. Is the rejection of Aristotle's criticism of Plato's cosmogony. Why? Because this criticism entails the rejection of demiurgic causation. And that's the real issue for Galen. It's not so much whether the word has been generated or not in time. It's the existence of craftsman-like demiurgic causation. The second issue is that this passage has a a rather clear parallel with a fragment from Atticus. There are further parallels between Galen's synopsis and Atticus too, regarding, for example, the soul and so on. It was why did Galen regard Atticus or someone like Atticus as his main authority? I think for several reasons. First of all, that was a very careful interpretation of Plato's text. That's okay. That was one reason. The other reason is that it was this trend in Platonist thought which mostly emphasized craftsman demiurgic causation, that divinity, God, is a benevolent craftsman. And I think that's the real key issue in Galen's engagement with Plato's cosmogony. I don't think this is at odds with what you say. I think it's just a complementary perspective. I would like to maybe have your reaction on that. And I would also mention an issue regarding the commentary on the medical parts of Plato's Timaeus. So the prologue of the synopsis is extremely fascinating. Galen tells that at a certain moment he realized that Plato is a doctor, so it was important for him to write a full commentary to the Timaeus. Why so? Maybe he was in a way self-advertising himself as the rhetoric of self-advertisement is crucial in Galen, and in the context of his time, he was self-advertising himself as the real interpreter of Plato, because he was, in a sense, the real philosopher, the one who really knows what philosophy is about. And in fact, in this commentary, we find the other issue, which is really crucial for Galen's interpretation of the Timaeus, that is the tripartite soul. So the division of parts of the soul, which is here in the extant fragments, especially important for Galen's analysis of plants. And there is a very fascinating section in the fragments and in Mark Schiefsky commentary. Timaeus in the dialogue attributes to plants the third form of the soul, and Galen engages these seriously and at length. So he endorses the identification of the plant soul with the phytike psyche, and argues that plants even have some kind of recognizing capacity. But this creates some tension because Galen has different views about plants in other works. And I think this is one of the most interesting philosophical issues in this commentary. I would like to have some more details on these because it seems to me for maybe Galen's reception in the subsequent tradition, which is, in my personal view, much larger than we think. Galen is not mentioned, but it doesn't mean that it is not used. I think that there are, for example, very interesting parallels between Plotinus and Galen. Well, of course, even for example, there are passages in which Plotinus has a rather high view about the plant's capacity. I wonder whether maybe Galen is behind it or not, maybe, but certainly it reveals a common cultural atmosphere. So this is my two issues. I think that it's not very important really to have a label on Galen. Is he a doctor? Is he a philosopher? Is he a Platonist? Is he not a Platonist? By the way, middle Platonism is a quite recent category. I think that it was Karl Prachter who first introduced this category. So it's not really important to define Galen as a middle Platonist, but I would stick to some issues. First of all, I'm very reluctant to identify Galen's background with handbooks. He had a primary knowledge of text. He wrote commentaries, and it was quite unusual, for example, to write Aristotelian commentaries at his time. And he has a primary knowledge of text and debate. And his standard was very high. He was proud of that, as he says whenever he can say this. And it was, I think, through this direct reading of Plato and Aristotle and of the commentators on Plato and Aristotle that Galen developed his own project, which is, of course, with many points of similarity with the philosophers of his time, both Platonist and Aristotelian, but is completely original from a certain point of view. It is a fully, completely original project, I would say, combining medicine, philosophy, selecting philosophical issues, and Pauline often emphasizes that Galen was first read as a philosopher in the Arabic tradition, but the same holds for the Greek tradition. What we know about the earliest reception of Galen in people like Clement or Plotinus or Porphyry shows that Galen was first and foremost read as a philosopher, criticized as a philosopher. The view that he is a doctor and should be put in a niche as a doctor is a subsequent view, I would say. So I would end by thanking again the editors for preparing this magnificent volume.
Yeah, I guess we respond. So thank you, Ricardo, so much for for your careful reading of our volume, which we can definitely see that you've engaged with the text, the notes, the introductions, which it's always great to get such a sensitive reader. Yeah, just thinking about your question about cosmogony and and for me, I'm thinking, and this is where I'm excited about the work that's being done just more in recent years on summaries. Like, why summarize, this dialogue? What does summary mean besides just kind of reducing down a text into it? So I think in one ways you could say, okay, that he's capturing paraphrastically what he believes Plato to be saying. It just seems like such a bold move, like for it just, to intervene, to kind of write in and to summarize and to convey this, this is Plato's words, like it's just such a hot topic, such a hot, button that he might not, personally care a lot about, but a lot of people kind of around him do, so it just seems like, for me to even understand this project is like, I'm still not convinced. Like, why is he summarizing it as compared to writing a commentary on it? What are summaries on the dialogue doing around the time that he's producing this work? I guess in terms of, yes, he might not be a Middle Platonist, but like, how does this text compare or is in dialogue? Yes, he's reading the source, but like, how do we read them in tension with one another? Like, what are they doing? What are the purposes? Who are they addressing? What audiences? There's just so many questions around this text that we just don't have answers from Galen himself about, except kind of this Latino or Arabic kind of a summary that gives us kind of sort of a little bit of a taster of how these two works on. But for me, like I think as somebody who's kind of grappled with this text, I think there's a lot of work to be done on thinking about, what he is doing, with summaries, how this text sits with, and for me, I see, even just doing a paraphrastic kind of summary, in such a intellectual environment where having a position, writing a commentary is a competitive exercise. It just feels so kind of loaded. It just even if it's like he's reproducing it kind of literally, even you know to be there's it feels like a very loaded act, to do that, just reading that in the text. And I want to, I am not kind of a scholar on, summarization. I traced a little bit about when I was trying to think a little bit like about this text, like what is it doing? What is it doing for Galen? What is it doing kind of, and how is it participating in conversations around just reading this text kind of dynamically, not only with Galen, but with also the environment, like the Platonic environment that's going around. So seeing kind of the parallels. So I think for me, that's what when I think about like the middle Platonic, and yes, you're absolutely right. This is kind of just a, imposition of a term. Like we love our categories in kind of modern times, but like, what is it doing in this environment? Like what conversations? So I think that was really for me, it was a provocation. Like, let's read this text kind of like in its intellectual environment. How is it contributing? How is it different? How is it working kind of within Galen? How is it working kind of among these different kind of intellectual streams that are making up the second century and third century CE? So, I'm happy, like Pauline, if you have anything you wanted to talk about, or Mark, but that's, really mine's a provocation. We need more work on summaries, and thinking about kind of summarization as an ideological act.
Yes, thank you so much, Eileen. Thank you so much, also Ricardo, for your, as usual, very insightful reading, and it allows us to, as soon as Ricardo reads one of my book, I feel the urge of writing a second version of the book. So, so now the book is not even. No, but thank you very much, Ricardo. Well, I would like to take this opportunity to grab the occasion to stress the importance of this text also for not only for Galenic studies, but for the studies of some of the themes of the Timaeus in the Arabic philosophy. Ricardo, you said that for Galen, cosmology is not such an important issue, and I perfectly agree with you on this level, that it's more
Cosmogony.
an so
Sorry,
yeah, cosmogony. Yeah,
cosmogony.
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 Sorry, cosmogony. Yeah, cosmogony. Yeah, sorry. But I would like. However, so the Timaeus was read within the Arabic milieu as this text that could be read by theologians to stress the argument by design. I mean, to use as a kind of playbook of the argument by design, and so it was widely used and as a point of contact also between philosophical and theological and medical milieu. And so I think that's one of the themes that really rose the interest of the Arabic philosophers. Another one was something that is very a mystery in the Arabic tradition is the atomism of the Kalam theologians. Kalam theologians are supporters of an atomist doctrine of nature, whereas Hellenistic philosophers of the Falsafa support a monist interpretation of nature, and some philosophers stand in between, like one of them, like Razi. And so there's always a question of where did, for example, Razi, but also Kalam theologian, where did this atomism come from? Is maybe there are several sources. Is the Greek one of those sources? Is the Timaeus one of those sources? And I think that the synopsis help us answer some of those questions or make it even more a mystery because, as you said, Ricardo, this synopsis is lacking some key passages of the Timaeus, and especially on the topic of the solids, the Platonic solids. So this is another theme. A third theme would be vision. A fourth theme will be pleasure. A lot of themes were that traveled through Arabic philosophy and theology um, with a Platonic origin, but I mean a very Galenic background. So that's also something that I wanted to stress that. Yes, of course, we shouldn't. I agree that it's not very useful to label Galen as a Platonist, but it's very interesting that in the Arabic tradition, some philosophers kind of found their way back to Plato through Galen. So this is what makes, in return, Galen a Platonist. Kind of yeah, so this is something that I wanted to stress, but now I leave the floor to Mark on the commentary.
Thank you. And thank you, Ricardo, for your comments. I have just three things that I would say. First of all, I think I agree it's very important to distinguish this question of cosmogony from demiurgic causation, since Galen, I mean, is clearly committed to the argument from design. You can see that from Deus Partium and everywhere in his corpus. So somehow there is a demiurge that is responsible. Was cosmogony, that's a separate question, which he is skeptical. We have to try to understand the role of demiurgic causation despite skepticism. It's an interesting issue because the causation is clearly a critical point for him. And I think this compendium is very interesting from that point of view. Second point is, I'm glad you were attracted to the account of plant cognition in the commentary. That is indeed I think the longest comments that we get on the introduction of the soul of plants. A little remark that is made in the Timaeus, then we get several pages of Greek comment. That is indeed one of the most philosophically rich and fascinating parts. I would just point out, since you mentioned, Ricardo, the fact that in the De Placitis, Hippocrates et Platonis, Galen talks about Platonic cosmology as pithanon. It's something that Plato put forward just as plausible, not as demonstrative. He tries to do the same thing with this question of the cognitive ability of plants. In Timaeus' commentary, in the section I translated, he says, well, plants have a gnoristique dunamis, it seems, the ability to recognize what is suitable for them and what is not. But then in the work on his own opinions, or on my own opinions, which he writes later, he tries to say, well, yes, this is an issue, and some people, have attacked me about that, but they don't understand that I was just saying what is plausible. He tries to massage the issue in this later work, and so it is something that is clearly a real issue for him, and he comes back to it later with a similar strategy to the way he tries to deal with some of these Platonic statements, making it pithanon, plausible rather than demonstrative. So they're interesting issues for his positioning towards these questions that can be gleaned from comparing those texts. And then my third point would just be there's a very strong degree of criticism of Plato in the commentary texts that I translated, particularly the Greek fragment. He agrees with Plato about the tripartite soul, of course, and the soul of plants. But he's very critical of Plato for being unclear, obscure, in the account of the mechanism of respiration, which, believe me, it is very challenging to make sense of that account in the Timaeus. And he's also, of course, very critical of the omission of attraction, physiological attraction, or holke, from that account. And so in that account, respiration is supposed to take place by this mechanism known as circular thrust, periosis, where somehow one thing follows another. As the breath comes in, breath is pushed out and more comes in, and there's a cycle back and forth, but there's no physiological attraction that is at work. And Galen is very upset about that. He says, how did Plato, ever come up with this idea? This is practically his only deviation from Hippocrates, because supposedly Hippocrates believed in attraction and as a physiological mechanism. So, when we think about, is Galen a Platonist? Galen is pretty pragmatic in his use of authorities, and he's not afraid of disagreeing with Plato, and he does so here pretty dramatically. So that's another aspect of this little fragment that I think is particularly interesting in terms of his intellectual stance. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aileen, Pauline, Mark, and Ricardo. I think we're running out of time. Maybe we can take one or two quick questions from the audience, if there are any.
If there is no question, may I just make a very short remark? And well, I take this occasion to thank really Ricardo, Eileen, Mark, and Pauline. And the remark is again on Middle Platonism, and I think that this book is really a huge contribution to our understanding ex negativo of Middle Platonism, in the sense that it is really an unconventional approach to the Timaeus, as far as I can see in the post-Hellenistic philosophy. And actually, it complements also the other important testimony we have of more or less the same time of a non-Platonist approach to the Timaeus, which is Adrastus. And it is very interesting that they are very different for a number of reasons, for commitments and so on. And what I learned, thanks to these, among the many things I learned, thanks to this discussion, is that, for instance, well, usually, at least as far as I can see, among the Platonists, the committed Platonists, those who would say, I'm a her of Plato, craftsmanship and cosmogony, or temporalist cosmogony, are closely related, systematically related. They produce a sort of solidity. And it is striking that we find a break in this solidity only with a thinker such as Galen. And the second thing is that I'm not certain that it is so neutral for a scholar of Middle Platonism to see Galen saying, look, I'm just producing a sort of reading of the Timaeus, and that the word came into existence is what the text says. Because this is something which may be obvious for us, in the sense that, for instance, you may have Baltes saying, okay, perhaps at a very superficial level, this is what the text says, but metaphorically, he's saying something else. But for a Platonist approach, saying, look, the text says exactly that the word came into existence, may represent maybe a challenge also against those who said, look, the text says that it was generated in a sense that excludes temporalism. So, of course, I'm committed to this kind of reading, so I want to read this move in this way. But I mean, this could but I'm just submitting to you this reaction, which is probably, only superficial. This may lead us to a further perspective of the exegesis of the Timaeus in this age. And the last thing I would like to add is that this discovery, I very much appreciated the very cautious way in which the Larraine fragments have been treated, because this was a risk, in my view, in this edition. But at the same time, it is very important that we found some kind of confirmation, if I had it right, of the Galenian origin to some extent of this text. But then the question is very quickly, do you think, there is this text on principles and matter which has been ascribed to Porphyry, even though it may be Porphyrian. No, and so we know that we don't know the extent to which it is really Porphyry, but the material is Porphyrian, and scholars have been treating it as Porphyrian, rightly so, in my view. Do you think that we can do the same with these fragments, those by Larraine, saying, okay, they're Galenian, so they're reliable as to Galen's approach? Or do you think that the mechanisms of transmission and alteration make it very difficult to really grasp the Galilean background?
Should I respond just quickly, if there's time? I think the former, which is that I do think we can get a sense of the Galenic background of the material, and one can get a sense perhaps of an emerging view of the soul as a kind of dry, like substance, which is echoed in the Quod Mores and other places. Having looked at it, very closely, I did come to the conclusion that it's probably connected with Galen's work on the Timaeus. So I do think that it is possible to get a sense of what he wrote from this material. But again, there's some kind of editing that went on in the creation of those things. There's certainly selection, obviously, but editing, they're not long-winded in the way Galen is. And there's some linguistic peculiarities. So it's mysterious, but I do think that, we can connect it with Galen himself. It's my view of it.
There is time. I would do a question.
Yes, please. We can take a final question, I would say, and then we bring the meeting to an end. Please, Giovanni.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. So I would like to ask you to mark Schiefsky the third point. So the Galenic criticism of Platonic uncertainty, or not to be precise in his treatment of respiration. Would you think that this attitude towards Plato is in a certain way authentic, or just a form of rational that Galen as an interpreter, so a commentator of Plato as well as Hippocrates, keeps with the pretext of asaphia, or in a certain way that this is not certain, so this make it possible to produce a commentary on something that is technical. So in a certain way, a commentary arises since something is not clear or manifest. So do you think the criticism is just because of this, or of course Plato was not a doctor, but how Galen engages with this sort of respiration or circulating of blood problem?
So, of course, one of the things that emerges from this is this sort of juxtaposition between Plato and Hippocrates, because, Plato was not a doctor, so he, didn't understand, all of these details in the way that Hippocrates did. And so by criticizing Plato in this part, he elevates, I think, the status of Hippocrates and also really the status of medicine, and then in that sense, his own status, because he has the authority to pronounce on these anatomical and physiological matters. And he says that in the De Placitis as well, that Plato was not a physician, so he didn't understand certain things. So I think that is going on. Yes, I mean, it is asafes, right? It is, he says, needlessly obscure, in fact. And it could have been formulated more clearly. So there is that level of just verbal expression that gets criticized in this account. Yes, it is interesting from multiple points of view. I'm not sure I fully grasped your question, but it is both as a commentator, trying to bring clarity to the text, he finds it unsatisfactory, and then as a medical authority, Plato is subordinate to Hippocrates because he has this weird mistaken view. So, yeah. Thanks for your
Okay.
question.
Thanks, Mark. If there are no further remarks in these, well, time is over. So, let me thank again our speakers as well as all of you for attending today's meeting. I hope you found the presentation as engaging as I did.